Welcome to this sort of first live stream. My name is Brian Haferkamp, and I am the creator of On-Base Baseball. And I just want to have a forum. If guys want to join in, ladies, if they want to join in and they have questions about the game. Some people have been playing it, and so I'm very appreciative of that. And the feedback that I've been getting about the game has been really great. So hopefully you'll go out there and play the game. There are a couple of demo teams, the 2019 Mets and 2019 Nationals, the Marlins. And so if I'll apply the link, let me go ahead and get that. Share the link with you here. And I'll put that here in the chat. And I'll share that again at the end of the session, and then you can go and play the game as well. So while we're waiting for people to come in, this is being recorded, so you'll probably be able to see it live. If you want to chat, if you have questions, feel free to put them there in the chat, say hello. And I just want to talk through just sort of where the game came from and answer any questions that you have if you've been playing the game. Hey there, Kenny. It's good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. And if you have any questions about the game, just put them in the chat, and I'll be paying attention to those and try to keep up with the questions. If I miss your question because people are asking other questions or I'm answering one, just feel free to type it again because I'm hoping the chat gets bumping, but we'll see. You can give them maybe 30 minutes or an hour or something. You want to chat about stuff, or if you have questions, especially about gameplay or game situations. But basically, On-Base started, and I'm a web developer by trade, and so I've been playing digital baseball games for a long time. So sort of Sims, and I was playing Out of the Park, like early 2000s. It was relatively new, hadn't quite taken off like it has recently, but it was still really solid, polished sort of game that they were putting out. And I just loved it. I spent hours as a young man, building teams and going through all this stuff. And I enjoyed playing arcade baseball games on the console and stuff like that, but I really love being in the manager role and making some of those decisions. I like to play Out of the Park in the manager side of things, and just making management moves and things like that during the game itself, as well as the GM. So I think it's always just sort of been a dream of mine to do that, and to do it on the web as opposed to creating a downloadable application. And so I started out to do that. I was like, well, I feel like I'm in the place where I can and I want to. And so I started on the journey to make my own online baseball game, which I actually completed. And in the process, I needed to find some sort of game engine to run the game on. And so I was doing a lot of research, and I thought I could use random dice rolls in order to run the online game. So I started looking into that more and more, and really getting into the concepts of dice baseball, especially like old school dice baseball. And so through a series of just research journeys, I kind of incorporated a few different elements. It was a 3D6 roll that I used for the online game. And I actually built the online game. You can play it. It requires a little bit of manual labor, I guess, on your work to input the lineups and make changes and stuff like that, which is a little bit of a pain in the neck because there's no like predetermined teams. But the cool part about that is you can play with any team that you can find. And I originally started using WAR, which is wins above replacement, which is sort of a singular number to say this player is more valuable than this player. And the beauty of that is that you can compare players across long stretches of period or long stretches of history. So a 4.8 war player in 1942 is similar to a 4.8 war player in 2002 or 2012 or 2020. So that was really cool way that you could sort of bridge the gap of time and allow more people, uh, more teams to kind of play against each other on equal footing. As I released that and started playing with it, it felt good. It was one singular number I could use for the outcomes, and I really needed something like that for the computer game because the algorithm is pretty basic. Excuse me. And then from that, I started just seeking out other things, and I don't not exactly sure. Oh, good question. Let me finish this thought, and then I'll get to that question, Kenny. So I somehow made my way into the cards and dice world. That's not something I grew up playing. So over time, after I finished the computer game and kind of got it to a stable place where I could play it and use a scorecard and things like that and actually play games, I moved on. And so this game, the cards and dice version of On Base actually came out of the computer game, which is sort of backwards for a lot of games. So that's how we got here, and then just been building out the cards and the game engine so that other people can play it offline as well as online. So to your question, Kenny, why not round up the speed rating number on the card? I don't know. No particular reason. I like the specific values just because it gives me specificity. But you're free to round them up or down, either one. What I typically do is I round them down. So if a player is a 7.6, I round them down to a 7. Um, Mostly that speed rating is a little bit outdated, but I like it because it's like a singular number. Some of there's some sort of components. They've broken that up into some more different components that are 2 or 3 different numbers for base running. And I really need a singular number. And I feel like that singular number is probably accurate enough for us to be able to use in a game. So you see a player who is a 7 out of 10, then he's going to be a really fast runner. The beauty of that number is that it rarely, if ever, gets to 9. I've never seen a 9 speed rating before, which would be a guarantee of a stolen base. And rounding down actually helps that. So if you have an 8.3 type player, you know, that's like your Lou Brocks of the world, 8.3, 8.5. You round them down to 8. It's not quite a guarantee, but you know, when you're stealing 100 bases a year for Ricky Henderson or Vince Coleman, you know, it's almost automatic whenever they take off. So they're not getting thrown out a lot. They are getting thrown out some, but not a lot. So I just round that number down, and then you make the roll. And if the roll of the D9 is higher than the player's speed value, then he's out. If it's lower or the same, then he's safe. So that's the sort of the short answer on rounding. So I do round it. I just don't round it on the card. Maybe you want to play something a little bit more fine or finely tuned than just rounding it to a whole number. I don't know how people will do it or how they want to do it. One of the things that I really wanted to do with this game is really to just provide a way for you to play. So providing the community with an engine that you can then develop your own style of play or even just your own flavor of game if you wanted to do that. But one of the hard parts is just getting the engine going. So um, that's sort of the getting you up to the place where you can play a game. And then I think most gamers have played enough games that they can bring in other elements. They can be creative and create their own elements. Maybe you've played a bunch of games and you wish someone would just do this, you know. Well, here's an engine for you to use to get to outcomes add your levels, add the levels of play, add the complexity that you wish that other games had, and play with that. And I give you a sort of a base game to play with and customize that. I'm totally fine with that, and would love to hear what you're doing because other people in the community might want to know that as well, because maybe that's going to solve a problem for different things for them too. Uh, all right, so we have another question. Do you have any plan to make some advanced Webflow tutorial? Maybe. I don't know. This is for baseball. This is not just general chat about web development, but I've done some basic Webflow stuff, but I will maybe do some more advanced. I don't use that in my daily work. My daily work, I usually use WordPress, but I really like Webflow a lot. So this is for this chat's for the on-base baseball game. I don't know if you have any interest in that or not, but it's a new game that'll be coming out, I hope, by opening day. I'm feverishly working on the card sets, so maybe every every day I get one or two done. So I'm on pace to finish, but the cards are also changing based on feedback. So I've put the demo cards out there, and people can play the game. And based on feedback from the community, based on feedback from people who are using it, then I'm actually making changes to the card, hopefully for the better, as I hear the sorts of things that you want to add into the card. So if there's something else after playing the game that you want to put on the cards, then I'm more than happy to consider those things. Some things are sort of a little bit too complex or a little bit too niche, and so I want to kind of keep the game at a basic level so that you can then tweak the game how you want to. I don't want to box it in too much. There's a real fine line between sort of moving it from playing a game to moving it to a simulation. And where is that line? When do you get there? It's kind of hard to tell when you get there. I think there's a little bit of a narrow strip there where you're kind of moving from one to another. And I just want to try to find a good balance for this particular game. It plays fast, it's easy to learn, and it feels sort of like early days dice baseball, because that's kind of what it was based on. Is can I take that sort of basic concept of dice baseball and can I turn it into something a little bit more mature and more complex, so that the outcomes are a little bit more realistic and you're able to manage the game a little bit more and have some control over the players. Excuse me. And so that was sort of my goal with the game. And the more complexity and realism that you put into the game, the less you lose sort of the flavor of playing a game, or the joy of playing a game. I've heard that from lots of people. Oh yeah, no worries. It's okay. Maybe I should do more live chats for web development too. So that's probably helpful for me too. But I've heard people playing the game who are, they say, you know what, this is the most fun I've had playing a dice baseball game in a long time. So I personally think that that's a really cool thing, and that's what I'm going for. Is baseball's fun. I know that we have sort of lost some of the fun of baseball, and the adults are kind of taking the fun out of baseball. But I grew up playing since I was in kindergarten, played all the way through high school, and maybe would have played into college, but played another sport instead. And so, I love baseball. I love this time of year, and spring is coming, and it's getting warm, and it just feels like baseball to me. And so, I wanted to bring back just the joy of being in the baseball game itself, because I tried out several card sets and games, and the problem that I kept running into was just it's like the game got in the way of playing the baseball game, which is what I wanted to do. And I never felt that way when I was playing the computer games. I felt like once I was into the game, I was in it, and I was playing the baseball game out. But with the cards and dice games, sometimes it was so complex, or there was so much movement from this chart to this chart to this chart, that it felt like the game of baseball got bogged down. in trying to make sure that you hit all the, like that everybody hit the right average or everybody had all the right plays or whatever. And to me, that didn't feel like a game. It felt like a second job. you know, I'm not a huge math guy anyway, and so it felt like work. And I don't want my games to feel like work. I want them to feel like fun and games. And so that was sort of the concept with On Base. But I wanted to make it as much within the realm of possibility as I can possibly make it. So I didn't want it to be so wacky that, some guy that hit one home run is hitting 50. I didn't want it to be like that. So I did want there to be some gradation in the types of players, how good the players are, that type of thing. And that was why I was using WAR, because WAR was sort of determining, how valuable the player is. And I just needed some way to grade them out. And I don't personally want to go through and grade all the players. They've already been graded based on their performance, especially if you're playing past seasons. You already know how it turned out. You just need those players to be graded. And they are graded based on their statistics. There's a lot of things that you got to kind of read into statistics. So that's why sabermetrics has become so popular, because you're trying to cut through the opinion based on sort of traditional statistics of, is this a valuable player? Is he a good player? Is he a good hitter? Is he a good fielder? How do you know? And so sabermetrics are trying to answer those questions. How do we know if this is a good pitcher? Because sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not. But how do we know that he is actually good at doing the job of pitching the baseball? How do we know this batter is actually good at doing the job of hitting? So those are the types of questions that I think we all want answered. And we've only had traditional sort of counter statistics. And, through the 90s, WHIP and OPS and things like that started to come into play. And then in the 2000s, as sabermetrics began to hit the market and become popular through the A's and then through the Red Sox and the Cubs. And, there's lots of different teams who have sort of elevated the status of sabermetrics. Really what they're doing, it's not scary. They're looking at the same stats that you are. They're just trying to use those to answer the same questions, just sort of in a different way. So if you go by your gut and you use sort of the same traditional statistics and you go by sabermetrics, I would say probably 75% of the time you're going to come out sort of looking at the same player in the same way. Hey, Kurt. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining in. And if you're looking at the sabermetric stats, you're going to come out with basically the same evaluations of the player. Albert Pujols looks good in sabermetrics, just like he does, well, maybe not now, but he did 10 years ago. He looked good in sabermetrics the same way that he looked when you look at traditional stats. If you look at Jacob deGrom today, it doesn't matter what you look at for deGrom. It's just, it's all going to lead you to the same answer. But there are some players that when we look at their traditional stats, we say, wow, he's not much of a player. But when you look at his value to the team in terms of wins, he becomes a really good player or an average player, where you might have thought, he didn't do very much, to help his team. He hit 225 and he had some home runs. He had 22 home runs. He had 60 RBIs, but maybe he hit 34 doubles. Maybe he played good defense, and his defense is hard to quantify. Good defense, but sabermetrics is trying to do that. So don't be afraid to say good defense, but sabermetrics is trying to do that. So don't be afraid of sabermetrics. The numbers are weird. Getting to them seems a little wacky, but a lot of the metrics that we're using, so I'm using weighted runs above average for batters. And so basically that means how many runs better than the average player is this player. So average is 0. And so the farther into the positive above 0 he gets, the better a player is. The farther below 0 he gets, the worse a player is compared to the average, the league average. And then for pitchers, we use Sierra or FIP. And yeah, right. It's crazy, right? Sometimes you come across these stats and you think, oh, this is a great player. So, Curtis is, he's telling us about the 76 Robin Yount's weighted runs above averages -20. That's in the poor range. You're getting pretty far away from zero at that point. And it's a really surprising sort of thing. You could look at his WAR, and his WAR might be 2.5, which is he's 2.5 runs better. Well, he's probably about 25 runs better than your sort of bench player, your quadruple A. I can just go out there and sign somebody for the league minimum. That's what zero is. And so he's about 25 runs better than that kind of player over the course of a season. And sometimes that happens because that accounts for defense, that accounts for base running, that accounts for batting. All of it together goes into the WAR rating. So just so you know, that's not only based on their offensive production. So what I did was I ran into some issues as I built the game on top of WAR. And the issues that I ran into were that some players are light hitters, but really great defensive players. So you're taking like an Omar Vizquel type, or Ozzie Smith was the one that everybody always talked about. So his WAR was crazy good. He was like a 3, 4, 5 WAR player all the time. But most of that was off of his glove, not off of his bat. And so, I had him in a particular category, and I set up the statistics from the categories, the outcomes, based on your typical 30 plus or your typical 6+ WAR player. But Ozzie Smith is not Mike Trout, right? He's not Babe Ruth. He's not some of these sluggers. So he was going to come out with inflated numbers. And then that made sense to me that I needed to separate all of those things out. So offense, defense, base running, they needed to be separated out. And so I tried to find the best values, singular values that I could in order to keep sort of the game set up the way it was. And maybe I could add another column, maybe not, but I think the 4 columns just helps with simplicity. And I think you're going to get to, when I started looking at players all on a sheet together and just looking at their values, sort of moving from one column to another, but going through a spreadsheet, there's not that much difference, honestly, between a guy who is a 10 weighted runs against or weighted runs above average and a guy who's a -5. There just isn't that much difference in their numbers, like the production that they have. You can tell that one is clearly better than the other and had a better year, but it's not so big. But when you have a guy who's a -20 like Robin Yount, and then you have a guy who's a 25, there's a lot of difference between their year, and you can really see it in the statistics. So one column to another, you're going to see little gradual changes, but from one column at the top to the guys at the bottom, you're going to see a lot of changes. So have I seen higher than a 76? You know what? If you go back and you look at Babe Ruth, you'll see some. I want to say he's got numbers higher than that, but you could go on to baseballreference.com or wherever you want to go, Fangraphs, and you can sort of look at all-time charts, and you can see who the all-time leader is in weighted runs above average. They have those charts at Baseball Reference or Fangraphs.com, at Baseball Prospectus. I think you can get those sorts of stats as well. So I actually have a video that you can check out if you want to play classic teams. So right now I'm creating the 2019 season. That's our last sort of real baseball season. And this is a modern game with sort of modern sensibilities. So the outcomes are for modern players. It's for guys who are hitting 40 home runs and stuff like that. But, one example I did was a 72 A's, that highest home run totals they had was like 25, right? So the game was different back then. The ball was different. The pitchers were different. Every pitcher that they had on the A's roster would have been considered an ace in on base. It would have been the very, lowest column. And so it's, the game is way different than it used to be. And so some of those adjustments are going to need to be made on the cards as we make those classic seasons to sort of fit with the times and the era. Just because the outcomes that I'm anticipating are more modern. So modern game, modern teams, that's sort of my idea here. But if you want to play classic teams, you can still use the game engine to play classic teams. And I actually have a video in this on-base playlist, and it shows you where to go to get the data, and then you can download that data and either create your own cards, or you can just, what I do is I just take the scorecard as I fill out the lineups, and then I just put in the data right into the scorecard. That way I have it. What's their batting rating, what is their defense, what is their speed, and then just have it right there that I can reference while I'm playing. And then you just roll, then you play, and you use the game engine chart, which you can find. You can find that at the, here's the URL again. It's in the chat. So you can go to this URL and you can download the game engine chart. You can download the scorecard. You can download the two teams, or you can just go back in time and look up all the numbers yourselves. So I want to make that available to you because it's going to take a while to get card sets out there. I have a few ideas for that about how to speed up that process, but at this point, it's just been me creating the cards, and I've managed to make that more efficient, but still, it's a little bit inefficient. It's just not an automated process where I can just put in the year and then it spits out cards. So it's not quite that fast. It's a little more manual. But what that manual does is it helps me to be able to sort of manipulate the outcomes on the cards so that we can try to get the statistics into a similar space to what the hitter is. So maybe the hitter is in the second category where he's a 10 to a 30 hitter, but he hit, 52 home runs. It's not graded out as the baseline for a hitter of that type to hit 50 home runs, but we can manipulate the outcomes just a little bit and give him another home run in the outcomes and usually take away, something he's not hitting like singles or triples or something like that. And we can turn it into another home run, and then we can sort of bump up his home run total. So little manipulations like that are happening on the players that you're not necessarily going to get just from playing the game straight up on the game engine chart. And so I want that to be free. You can always take that and play, whatever games you want to. You can make people up. You can do fictional universes or whatever you wanted to do, and you just assign them. You assign them weighted runs above average numbers. You assign them a bit, or you use some sort of computer algorithm to figure those things out. You can mix and match players over history. You can play teams against each other. So I love that. I love that you can just sort of get out there and create and make whatever game or universe you want to with the chart. But as far as the cards are concerned, because there's a little bit more manual labor that goes into that, those will be, you'll have to pay to buy those seasons, but I've done all the work for you. So I've looked up all the stats. I've put all the outcomes together for you for the players, and then you can just purchase those and begin playing. So that's sort of conceptually what we want to do. And I had a question here. Can you use Excel to automate your card creation? I actually have. I have done that. Before I was doing everything by hand. Let's see, what's one I'm doing? So basically, this is the Nationals, 2019 Nationals. So I've gone through and I used baseball. I don't know if I can share. If I can share that or not. basically what I do is I go through and I do download the statistics for pitchers and hitters. I have sort of some things set up on Fangraphs that give me those charts, all the values that I want automatically. So I download those, work through those through Baseball Reference. I can get the first 15, like the top 15 batters and top 15 pitchers for the year. I take those and whittle that big list down to those top 15. I keep them in two separate sheets in the Excel file. And then I have other sheets for the batting cards and the hitting cards. And what I've done is I've just put formulas inside those cells, and it'll automatically bring the data in. As long as I format everything correctly in the pitching and the hitting, it'll just bring those players right over into the cards layouts that I've set up. And then all I have to do is just manipulate and set the outcomes after that. But I do have to do, I got to find out their numbers and their, batting left and right and stuff like that. So there's a little bit more manual input than I want, but this is about as streamlined as I've been able to get it up to this point. So it is a lot faster. It was taking me, 2 or 3 days to do one team. Now I can do a couple of teams in a whole day. So it is going much faster than it was before. But also, like I was saying earlier in this presentation, that's as guys play the game, they're also making suggestions for how the card should be restructured, reordered. When you're playing, it's really important to be able to see this or see that, and so the cards are going through a little bit of a restructuring, and so that's part of it too. So that's slowing things down a little bit, but I think I've settled on sort of a card design, whittled it down, and now I'm just going to focus mostly on producing the cards. I'm hoping by opening day, to answer your question about ETA, hopefully opening day of this year, we can have the 2019 season out and ready to purchase. And I think initially it's going to be PDFs. I do want to have some sort of a print on demand option where you can choose a team and then print it, like to buy actual cards. But that's going to take a little bit of legwork, which may not happen until either later this year or next year or something. So, but I would like to have that option. One, so I don't have to carry a lot of inventory, and two, so that I don't have to do a lot of the legwork of shipping and things like that. So I want to find a decent partner for that. Talking potentially just someone who can help with that, who's been doing this for a long time. So that would be super helpful too. And so I would like to have cards that you can actually purchase, but at least for the time being, it's going to be PDFs and you just print them out. One that helps to keep the cost down. There's the card design too. There's really limited amounts of color on there, no blocks of color, which means that you don't have to spend a bunch of money printing out or wasting a bunch of color on the cards. So I'm trying to think about those things as I create the cards too, to give them some distinction between the teams, but not so much that that it becomes a really expensive decision to print the cards, since this is the only way to go at this point. So hopefully that will help to keep the cost of the game down. And like I said, if you want to do all the legwork, you're free to download the game engine chart. I think Curtis, you downloaded the game engine chart, so and you've sort of manipulated it and put it in a package that's good for you. And I have another guy who's wanting to do dead ball era stuff. So I think that it's really cool to be able to see how the game engine will fit into all these eras of baseball as you sort of move along, because baseball has changed a lot, just in the last 50 years. Baseball's changed a lot. So to see how the game engine can be manipulated in order to get you pretty close to outcomes is really, I think that's an exciting sort of near future for me to be able to see those kinds of things. Oh, thank you. I don't know that I'm a champion, but I appreciate it. So, yeah, I guess if you're in web development, you can go and learn a lot about web development through my channel as well. But I'm using this right now for on base for the baseball game. Any other questions? So we got 6 people on so far. So looks looking good. Anybody tried it or give any feedback or any feedback as to gameplay, questions about gameplay, that type of thing? I have put a couple showing 9-inning demos, basically, so playing the game fully. And those are on the channel, and I can share those as well. Can bring those up. So here are a few of them, and them on here. So I do have a playlist here on my channel for on base that you can go into, and let me pull this. You get this game 1 demo. And get the link. So this is the link for the first game demo that I did. So you can check that out. And I also have a couple other links. One is for how to get classic teams. So if you do want to just use the game engine to play a classic team, then this one is it. So you can check that out. Hopefully that comes through on the live chat as well. So that's a couple of links for you to check out. Here is the a link just straight to the all of the on-base videos that we have. And anytime that we add new videos, we'll be adding it to that playlist. So good, thank you. I don't know that I could deal with it if it was too complex. You know, I sit down and I want to have fun playing a game. That's why I play games. So that's why I go to the ball game to watch. I love the anticipation of baseball. I love the pace of baseball. So you can tell I'm not the most super exciting person. So I'm like you're a diehard baseball fan. You know, pretty slow, and you know, you like to see the game unfold over time. You like to see big players play big. You like to see surprises every once in a while, and you like, you know, if you're like me, I love pitching. So my game might trend a little bit more toward pitching, but I've noticed some changes and tweaks that we made just recently that are, you know, it's bringing the scores up just a little bit to a little bit more realistic. Not everything is 3-2 or 4-1 or whatever, but you do get some games that are, you know, your 2-1s or your 2-0. Or the other day I played with Zach Wheeler. He went 9 innings and through a complete game. He went a little bit past his stamina, but I kept him in the game. They were up like 6-1 or something. And you know, it feels real. It feels like you're playing a real baseball game, but you're not having to do so many of the mechanics. And honestly, you're not going to get a lot of the fancy plays. So there's, you know, you're not going to get wild pitches unless you put those in. But just playing the base game, you're not going to get a lot of like super strange plays or anything like that. But it's just going to be your average run-of-the-mill baseball game that you're playing. You see home runs and triples and um, doubles and double switches, and you can play a really strong baseball game, but it's not going to have some of like the park effects and things like that. So if you want to add that sort of complexity into the game, I was hoping that by just putting the base game out there, that guys would take that base game and sort of make it into something more. And I think that bringing in elements from other games or game elements that you wish you could see in other games, that the other games are just a little too restrictive to even bring those elements in. Maybe this is a fresh canvas to be able to do that. And I want to be as open and transparent as with what I'm doing as I can. Um, I'm not trying to hide how you get to the results or outcomes. We're just trying to play baseball. And baseball is a great game, and it's great in and of itself. We don't have to do anything to manipulate the outcomes. But what I want to do is I want to go to a game, and I want to, not physically, but I want to play a baseball game. And what I want that game to do is I want to be able to manage the game so that my guys are in a position to have the potential to do what they can do. So whether they do it or not, that's sort of up to the roll of the dice, which is kind of what it is in baseball. It's kind of up to the roll of the dice. But I don't want it to be, I don't want to just be sitting and watching the game. I want to participate in the game. I want to be surprised by the game. I'm not trying to make the outcomes come out a particular way. I'm just trying to get people into the realm of possibility of what kind of player they are and what they could be. So hopefully that brings back a level of fun and excitement to being able to play. There's a lot of kids they're not interested in baseball, but back in the day when we had all of these dice games, baseball was kind of king of the hill. And I don't know if it was because it was just fun. Kids were playing on the sandlot and they were doing things that kids today just aren't going to do. I mean, I used to play wiffle ball out in the front yard in the summertime with all my friends and all that kind of stuff too. So we were always just seemed to be playing baseball all the time. And I just wanted to bring back a little bit of the fun, because I think the games as they are now are pretty accurate, but they're not always that fun. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of work because they want to be so accurate to say these kinds of things, and you get roasted by people. But ultimately, I think people enjoy baseball. They still go to the games. They still watch their teams. They still get into it. And I think that this game can reflect the level of fun and just sort of get out of the way and allow the baseball game to progress in front of you on a piece of paper. So that's sort of my thoughts going with that. So I'm glad you appreciate that, and I hope others do too. As we release the game, tell others about it. That would be a tremendous help. That you've enjoyed it. If you do any sort of blogging or putting things on, or you talk to people, I'd love to talk about the game and just sort of let people know about it. But I think it's a unique space to be in. To be sort of an entry level game into the more complex games. So that's kind of the space where OnBase is going to have it. I've joked about it. It's like a gateway game to the more complex and more accurate sort of ways to play, or the games to play. And I think that there's room on that spectrum for a little bit of everything. And so that's sort of the space that we're trying to fill with that. Any other questions? Lots of ideas about customizations to use with the game. And the game provides a canvas. So you're very welcome for doing that. And I love baseball, man. I can't get it out of my blood. And my wife doesn't understand it, but I think most of the guys playing these games and most of the people playing these games understand that. Thanks for following, and we'll be getting it out there. Oh, the logo, yeah. So on the Delphi forums, I'll put that out there. So maybe on the Tabletop Plus Facebook page, I'll put that out there too to just see what people think. I think I want to strike the right tone. It's got kind of a nostalgic feel to the game, but it's a modern sensibility to the game. So, how can we sort of bring those two things together? And just and saying something. Like I said, opening day is what we're shooting for. I know it's a big day, and it's an exciting time, that first week of baseball, and hopefully you can get it done. I'm just going to start focusing a little bit more on the card creation process at this point. I think that'll end it up here. If you have any questions or comments, you can go to the page where you can actually download the game and play it. Download the game engine chart. That's the URL there. And when you go to the URL, it's got some contact information for me, so you can email me or find me on Twitter or send me a message on the Delphi forums, however you want to get that available. And I'll be sharing this video as well. So feel free to reach out to me and contact me about questions about the game, about gameplay, things that don't make sense from the quick start guide, or any errors that you see on the cards themselves or with the game itself. And hopefully, the concept comes across, and you can catch the wind of the concept. Like Curtis is saying, it's sort of a basic canvas that you can then build a game with sort of customizations that you want in order, especially on the base running and fielding. How do you want to handle those things? How do you want to play those things? What do you like from other games? Bring those in. What do you wish other games had? Add those to the game, to the base level game. And I'm going to try to create a forum of some sort, maybe on Delphi, just where people can share their customizations about how they're dealing with certain situations. How do you deal with builder's choice? How do you deal with in these situations? What sort of customizations or homebrew rules do you have in order to help others as they come across the same questions? So that's sort of in the future. Once we get the product out there and people are playing it, I think more people have more questions about those things. But thank you to everyone who so far has demoed the game and tried it. And if you haven't demoed it yet, go to the link here in the chat and make sure that you download the demo teams, or you can download the game engine chart. Excuse me, and then you can begin playing the game with classic teams as well. All right, well, I'm going to cut this chat off, but thank you to everyone who showed up this evening, and I'll try to do a few more of these as we go along the way. And yeah, happy rolling. Thanks for coming.